Have you ever wondered what you'd do if your neighbor broke your disabled daughter's arm, and then tried to blame her for it? Picture this, a quiet Saturday morning in suburban Ohio, the kind where the only thing louder than the birds is the sizzle of your grill. Then, out of nowhere, a clipboard-wielding HOA tyrant storms in, ready to ruin your day. This is my story, and trust me, it's a doozy. It was a perfect spring morning in our cul-de-sac, the kind of place where kids ride bikes and old guys argue about lawnmowers. I'm Mike, a middle-aged dad who grills a mean burger and keeps a secret. I'm a federal agent. Nobody in the neighborhood knows, and I like it that way. I was on my porch, flipping patties, keeping an eye on my daughter, Emily. She's 12, uses a wheelchair because of cerebral palsy, and is tougher than most grown men I know. She was out front, tossing a ball for her service dog, Max, a golden retriever who's better behaved than half the neighbors. Emily's wheelchair was parked on our lawn, Max's leash clipped to it like always. My phone sat on the porch table, buzzing with fantasy football alerts I was ignoring. Everything was peaceful, until she showed up. Enter Karen, the new neighbor from hell. Early 50s, oversized sunglasses perched on her nose like a vulture's beak, and a clipboard clutched like it's the Constitution. She's the HOA's self-appointed enforcer, the kind of woman who'd fine you for a blade of grass out of place. She came barreling across the street, her flip-flops slapping the pavement, waving that clipboard like a battle flag. "Your dog's destroying the neighborhood," she shrieked, pointing at Max, who was sitting politely on our lawn, tail wagging. I saw him digging up my petunias. "Lady," I called from the porch, "Max doesn't leave our yard." Maybe it was a squirrel. Emily, sweet as ever, tried to chime in. "Max stays with me, ma'am. He's a good boy." Karen wasn't having it. She marched right up to Emily, looming over her wheelchair. "You need to control that beast," she snapped, jabbing a finger at Max, "or I'm calling the HOA, and trust me, I will get results." I started down the steps, burger spatula still in hand, but before I could get a word in, things went south. Emily, trying to show Karen the leash, said, "See? He's clipped to my chair." Karen, in a huff, grabbed Emily's arm to demonstrate how to hold it properly. She yanked, hard. There was a sickening crack, and Emily screamed, a sound that still haunts my nightmares. The clipboard hit the grass. Max barked, backing away. I sprinted over, phone grabbed on instinct. Emily was crying, clutching her arm. Karen stood there, sunglasses slipping, stammering, "It was an accident." She jerked away. "An accident?" I roared, dialing 911. "You just broke my kid's arm." I knelt by Emily, whispering, "You're okay, kiddo. Help's coming." Max pressed against her, whining. Karen had the nerve to keep talking. She shouldn't have resisted. "And that dog's a menace." I tuned her out, focusing on Emily. A couple of neighbors peeked from their windows, but nobody came out. Typical. The ambulance screeched in, and the EMTs got to work, stabilizing Emily's arm. I climbed in with her, leaving Karen on the curb, arms crossed, muttering about overreacting. As we pulled away, I caught her smirking, snapping a photo of my mailbox with her phone. That's when I knew, this wasn't over. So, guys, what would you have done in my shoes? Ever had a neighbor like Karen who thinks they own the block? Drop your stories below, I want to hear your worst neighbor tales. Stick around, because Karen's about to learn she picked the wrong dad to mess with. You'd think breaking a kid's arm would make someone apologize. Not Karen. She went nuclear, turning our quiet cul-de-sac into her personal battlefield. While Emily was in pain and I was drowning in rage, Karen was out there spinning lies faster than a used car salesman. This is what happened next. The hospital ER was a blur of antiseptic smells and beeping machines. Emily, my brave girl, was wincing as the doctor set her arm in a cast. Her eyes were red, but she managed a weak smile when I promised her favorite pizza for dinner. I was barely holding it together, torn between wanting to hug her and wanting to march back to Karen's house with a few choice words. Instead, I focused on what I do best, gathering intel. I pulled out my phone, snapped photos of Emily's cast and bruises for evidence, and called the police to file a report. The officer was sympathetic but cautious, jotting down my account, Karen's false accusation about Max, her grabbing Emily, the sickening crack. I handed over Emily's medical records, my voice steady but my hands shaking. Back home, Emily rested, Max curled up beside her. I thought the worst was over. Then I checked the mailbox. There it was, a crisp HOA letter, accusing me of harboring a dangerous animal and creating a public nuisance. Karen's name was all over it, her signature as smug as her smirk. My blood boiled. This woman had the gall to break my daughter's arm and then play victim. I tucked the letter into a folder, starting a log of every move she made. Federal agent or not, I wasn't about to let this slide. Karen wasn't done. By Monday, the neighborhood was buzzing with her version of events. She'd been knocking on doors, her clipboard back in hand, telling anyone who'd listen that Emily's untrained mutt lunged at her, forcing her to defend herself. Some neighbors bought it, nodding along to avoid her wrath. Others, like old Tom across the street, just shut their doors. I overheard one guy at the corner store muttering about my reckless parenting. It took everything not to set him straight. Instead, I kept my phone handy, recording Karen's next rant when she cornered me outside. "You're lucky I don't sue for emotional distress," she snapped, oblivious to the red light blinking in my pocket. The police were no help. They called it a he said, she said situation, unwilling to arrest Karen without witnesses. No one had stepped up, those window peekers from Saturday were staying quiet. Frustrated, I leaned on my training, documenting everything, dates, times, Karen's exact words. I saved every HOA letter, photographed her car parked illegally on the curb, even noted her daily clipboard patrols. If this was going to be a war, I'd fight it with paper and proof. Then Karen upped the ante. A certified letter arrived, its envelope now a permanent resident of my home office. Inside was a threat: remove Max and keep Emily indoors, or she'd sue for neighborhood endangerment. I laughed, but it was the kind of laugh you get when you're one step from losing it. Sue us? After what she did? I wasn't just mad anymore, I was motivated. I called an ADA lawyer, a guy I'd met through work who specialized in disability rights. He was all business, telling me to keep every scrap of evidence and document any ADA violations. "This woman's digging her own grave," he said. "Let her." That's when I started digging too. Late at night, after Emily was asleep, I fired up my laptop and ran Karen's name through public records. It didn't take long to find dirt. She'd pulled similar stunts in 2 other states, HOA complaints, lawsuits, even a restraining order from a family with an autistic kid. The pattern was clear: Karen targeted anyone she saw as weak, especially families with disabilities. I printed every court record, organizing them in a labeled folder. This wasn't just about Emily anymore, it was about stopping a serial bully. Karen, clueless as ever, kept pushing. She filed her own police report, claiming Max attacked her and she only grabbed Emily to protect herself. The cops didn't buy it but didn't dismiss it either, leaving us in legal limbo. She even tried intimidating Tom, banging on his door and accusing him of spying after he waved at Emily. Tom, a retired mechanic with zero patience for nonsense, told her to get lost. I owed him a beer for that. Every day, Emily asked when things would go back to normal. I didn't have an answer, but I promised her justice. She'd nod, petting Max, her cast a constant reminder of Karen's cruelty. I wasn't just fighting for her, I was fighting for every dad who's ever watched their kid hurt and felt powerless. Karen thought she could outmaneuver me with her clipboard and her lies. She had no idea who she was dealing with. By week's end, I was ready for the next phase. I ordered security cameras for the porch and driveway, their boxes stacked in the garage. I'd catch Karen's next move on tape. I also reached out to neighbors, casually asking if they'd seen anything that day. Most shrugged, but Tom mentioned his doorbell cam might have picked up something. My heart raced. If that footage had audio, it could change everything. Karen had no idea she was about to star in her own episode of How to Get Owned by a Federal Agent. While she was out there spinning her web of lies, I was building a case that would make her clipboard tremble. With Emily's arm in a cast and Max still dodging Karen's slander, I wasn't just fighting for my family, I was on a mission to bury this bully in her own paperwork. Here's how I turned the tables. Tom's mention of his doorbell cam was the break I needed. I swung by his place, and the old gearhead handed me a USB stick with a grin. "Caught that harpy yelling her head off," he said. Back home, I plugged it into my laptop. The footage was grainy, but the audio was gold. Karen's voice, sharp as a buzzsaw, berating Emily about Max, followed by Emily's scream and Karen's, "It was an accident," excuse. It wasn't a direct video of the arm breaking, but it painted a clear picture of her aggression. I backed up the file, labeled it, and added it to my growing evidence pile, right next to the HOA letters and Karen's threatening certified envelope. Next, I got to work on the cameras. I spent a Saturday installing them on the porch and driveway, their empty boxes now cluttering the garage. These weren't just for show, they were my eyes when I wasn't home. If Karen so much as sneezed on our lawn, I'd have it on tape. I also started canvassing the neighborhood, not as a fed but as a dad looking for answers. Most folks dodged me, not wanting to cross Karen's warpath, but a few let slip that she'd been harassing other families too, complaining about kids' bikes, mailboxes, even a guy's flagpole. It was like she'd declared herself queen of the cul-de-sac. My ADA lawyer was a godsend. Over coffee, he laid out the game plan, document every ADA violation, from Karen's grab to her demands that Emily stay indoors. He told me to keep all medical records, HOA correspondence, and now the doorbell footage. "You're building a fortress," he said. "Make it airtight." So I did. I photographed Emily's cast, her bruises, even Max's leash to prove he was always clipped. I scanned every HOA letter, noting Karen's signatures, and filed them in a folder with the hospital bills. My home office looked like a war room, papers and USB sticks everywhere, but I was in my element. Then came the deep dive. Using my federal access, off the books, mind you, I dug deeper into Karen's past. The public records I'd found were just the tip. She'd been a menace in 2 other states, racking up lawsuits and HOA disputes like trophies. In one case, she'd harassed a family with a disabled son until they moved. In another, she'd sued a neighbor over a dangerous poodle, only to lose when the judge called her claims frivolous. I printed every court record, organizing them in a labeled folder. This wasn't just evidence, it was a portrait of a woman who thrived on control and cruelty. I wasn't stopping there. I filed a formal ADA complaint with the lawyer's help, attaching everything: Tom's footage, medical reports, HOA letters, Karen's certified threat, and a detailed log of her behavior. The complaint accused her of disability-based harassment, citing Emily's cerebral palsy and Max's role as a service dog. It was a brick of paperwork, and I mailed it certified, imagining Karen's face when she got served. For good measure, I requested public records from the HOA itself, looking for any complaints Karen had filed. Turns out, she'd been spamming them with nonsense since she moved in, everything from unauthorized flower beds to excessive dog barking. The HOA was sick of her too. The neighborhood was starting to shift. Tom's footage got a few folks talking, and one couple admitted they'd heard Karen yelling that day but didn't want trouble. I didn't push, they'd come around when it counted. Meanwhile, Karen kept up her campaign, strutting around with her clipboard, unaware I was watching. She even tried leaning on Tom again, accusing him of spying with his doorbell cam. He laughed her off, but I added her intimidation attempt to my log. Every move she made was another nail in her coffin. By now, Emily was back to school, her cast covered in classmate signatures. She was a trooper, but I caught her staring out the window, worried Karen might come back. I promised her Max was safe and we'd win this. To lighten the mood, I let her pick out a new toy for Max, a squeaky ball he went nuts for. Seeing her laugh was fuel to keep going. The turning point came when I took the new evidence to the police. Tom's footage changed their tune. They re-interviewed Karen, who doubled down, claiming the audio was taken out of context. She even tried to spin Tom as a creep for having a camera. The cops weren't impressed. They didn't arrest her, yet, but they set a court date, which was music to my ears. Karen still had no clue about my job or the storm I was brewing. She thought she was untouchable, but I was about to show her what happens when you mess with a dad who's got a badge and a grudge. You know that moment when the villain realizes they picked the wrong target? This was it. Karen waltzed into the county courthouse with her clipboard and her lawyer, thinking she'd steamroll us like she had everyone else. But I'd spent weeks building a case tighter than a bank vault, and today was the day it all came crashing down on her. Here's how Karen's reign of terror met its match. The courthouse was a no-nonsense brick building, all fluorescent lights and creaky benches. I was representing myself, not because I couldn't afford a lawyer, but because this was personal. Karen strutted in, sunglasses perched on her head, her lawyer looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. She clutched that damn clipboard like a shield, scribbling notes as if she were the judge. I sat calmly, my evidence stacked in a folder from my home office, Tom's USB stick, medical records, HOA letters, Karen's threatening certified envelope, and her wrapped sheet of past lawsuits. It was a legal arsenal, and I was ready to unload. The judge, a grizzled guy who looked like he'd seen every flavor of stupid, called us to order. I went first, laying out the incident with precision, Karen's false accusation about Max, her grabbing Emily's arm, the crack that still echoed in my nightmares. I handed over the USB stick, and the courtroom's ancient TV flickered to life with Tom's doorbell footage. Karen's voice filled the room, shrill and accusing, followed by Emily's scream. The judge's eyebrows shot up. Karen shifted in her seat, her clipboard suddenly still. Next, I presented Emily's medical records, the folder heavy with hospital reports and photos of her cast. I walked the judge through the HOA letters, each one dripping with Karen's venom, and the certified envelope where she demanded Emily stay indoors. Finally, I dropped the bombshell, Karen's history of harassment, documented in court records from 2 states. This isn't an isolated incident, I said. It's a pattern of targeting vulnerable families, especially those with disabilities. The courtroom was silent, except for Karen's lawyer whispering frantically in her ear. Karen took the stand, and it was a masterclass in self-destruction. She stuck to her story, Max lunged, she defended herself, Emily jerked away. But when the judge asked about the doorbell audio, she fumbled, claiming it was misleading. I caught her in a lie when she said she'd never met Emily before. Tom's footage showed her yelling at her a week earlier about a messy lawn. The judge's pen stopped moving, his eyes narrowing. Karen, sensing the tide turning, started interrupting, accusing me of fabricating evidence. The judge shut her down with a single word, enough. Her lawyer tried to salvage things, arguing the arm breaking was an accident and the HOA complaints were community-minded. But he couldn't explain away the ADA violations or Karen's history. When I cross-examined, I kept it simple. Why did you grab a disabled child's arm to demonstrate anything? Karen sputtered, her sunglasses slipping. The judge wasn't buying it. The verdict came fast. The judge ruled in my favor, his voice like gravel. Karen was ordered to pay Emily's medical damages, my legal fees, and issue a written apology. All her claims against Emily and Max were dismissed, with a nod to ADA protections. He went further, mandating anger management classes and barring her from contacting my family. The courtroom felt lighter, like a storm had passed. Karen's lawyer looked defeated, her clipboard was nowhere in sight. As we filed out, Karen's composure cracked. She stormed past me, muttering about corruption, and I watched her hurl her clipboard into a courthouse trash can with a clang that echoed down the hall. It was almost poetic, her weapon of choice, discarded like her credibility. Outside, I called Emily to tell her the news. "We won, kiddo," I said, hearing her cheer through the phone. Max barked in the background, and for the first time in weeks, I smiled. The neighborhood got the memo fast. By evening, folks were whispering about Karen's defeat. A few who'd bought her lies stopped by to apologize, one even bringing Emily a batch of cookies. Tom, my new favorite neighbor, cracked open a beer and toasted to justice. Karen's house went quiet, her daily patrols a thing of the past. Some neighbors started avoiding her altogether, crossing the street when she appeared. It was like the cul-de-sac had been exorcised. But I wasn't done. Karen thought this was over, that she could slink away and start fresh somewhere else. She didn't know I had one last card to play, one that would make her regret ever stepping foot in our neighborhood. My federal badge was still in my pocket, and it was time to use it, not for revenge, but for the kind of accountability that sticks. The courtroom was just the warm-up, the real finale was coming, and Karen was about to learn exactly who she'd crossed. Revenge is a dish best served with a side of federal paperwork. Karen thought the courtroom loss was the end, that she could slink away and terrorize some other neighborhood. But I wasn't just a dad with a grudge, I was a federal agent with a point to prove. The judge had clipped her wings, but I was about to ground her for good. Here's how it all wrapped up, with a bow on top. The day after the verdict, I stood on Karen's porch, her beloved clipboard nowhere in sight. She answered the door, her sunglasses missing, looking like she hadn't slept. Before she could slam it, I handed her 2 documents. The first was a copy of the ADA guidelines, highlighted to show every violation she'd committed against Emily. The second was a letter, printed on official letterhead, stating she was now on a federal watch list for disability-based harassment. "I'm Mike," I said, pausing for effect. "Federal agent. You picked the wrong family." Her face went from red to ghost white, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. For once, Karen had no comeback. I turned and walked away, leaving her to stew in the mess she'd made. Back home, life started to feel normal again. Emily's arm was healing, her cast now a canvas of doodles and signatures. She was back to tossing a ball for Max, who sported a new bright red leash, a gift from Tom and his wife, who'd become our biggest cheerleaders. Emily's laugh was louder now, her worry about Karen fading like a bad dream. I caught her one day, giggling as Max chased his squeaky ball, and it hit me, we'd won more than a court case. We'd taken back our peace. The neighborhood was changing too. Karen's defeat was the talk of the cul-de-sac, and folks who'd stayed quiet started opening up. One guy admitted he'd gotten an HOA fine from her for his kid's tricycle. Another said she'd complained about his tacky Christmas lights. It was like Karen's loss had lifted a curse. To keep the mood light, I hammered a sign into our front lawn, "Karen Repellent Zone," with a cartoon clipboard crossed out. Emily helped design it, and neighbors cracked up every time they passed. Tom called it, "the best damn yard art in Ohio." Karen didn't last long after my visit. Within a month, a "for sale" sign went up at her place. Have you ever wondered what you'd do if your neighbor broke your disabled daughter's arm, and then tried to blame her for it? Picture this, a quiet Saturday morning in suburban Ohio, the kind where the only thing louder than the birds is the sizzle of your grill. Then, out of nowhere, a clipboard-wielding HOA tyrant storms in, ready to ruin your day. This is my story, and trust me, it's a doozy. It was a perfect spring morning in our cul-de-sac, the kind of place where kids ride bikes and old guys argue about lawnmowers. I'm Mike, a middle-aged dad who grills a mean burger and keeps a secret. I'm a federal agent. Nobody in the neighborhood knows, and I like it that way. I was on my porch, flipping patties, keeping an eye on my daughter, Emily. She's 12, uses a wheelchair because of cerebral palsy, and is tougher than most grown men I know. She was out front, tossing a ball for her service dog, Max, a golden retriever who's better behaved than half the neighbors. Emily's wheelchair was parked on our lawn, Max's leash clipped to it like always. My phone sat on the porch table, buzzing with fantasy football alerts I was ignoring. Everything was peaceful, until she showed up. Enter Karen, the new neighbor from hell.